Friendly hellos. Welcome back to the second Notary Governance call of August 22nd. Quick check-in on what we have on the agenda if this is your first time joining us. The call is broken into four parts. Part one is notary issues. So we'll be talking about an update related to the inactive notaries. Second part of the call is working group updates. On the morning, KZ and RG joined us for disclosures and updates around the Enterprise Fill Plus, what's going on with their MultiSig update, as well as the quality deal making. We have RG on the call this evening to walk us through some of the updates around the notary removal process and what's going on with the dispute resolution. On the morning call, when we moved into proposals, we had a lot of discussion that was really productive around the notary incentives for the V5. Should we move forward with that? As well as discussions on 774. On the morning call, we spent a lot of time on 961, which led to a lot of great tangents. So on this call, if there's anything on your mind, lots we can dive into, or we can always link you the conversation in the morning if we don't have time. Then at the very end, we'll always have a section for open discussion. So anything that might be on your mind, we'll carve out time to go over that. So with that, if this is your first time on the call or you're joining, this is the second call of August 22nd. If you follow this link right here, it will take you to all of these calendars in Google. And from there, you can join any future calls that take place. I've also put the deck that we're reviewing right now in Slack as well as the chat. So if you want to grab any links from this presentation, it's right there in chat for you to grab it. The next call is taking place on September 5th. If you need support, you have a governance team here to help you. If you're not sure who to reach out to, you can always route it to me, Kevin-FF, and I'll be happy to guide you to the right repo or Slack channel or POC to help you with your issue. All right, so with that, notaries, hello. So I'm going to post the link to this Airtable. As always, big thank you for signing this. This is tied to the SLA for the applications in round 4, as well as a really easy way for notaries to kind of allocate where time is being spent in the program. Is it tooling? Is it applications? Is it anything taking place on proposal writing? And what's nice about this data is it lets us know where we should invest priorities for engineering on support to make your lives easier and more effective as you're allocating data cap to onboard the data. So thank you for that. That link is right there in chat as well for you to sign and go forward. And a friendly reminder, we talked about this on the last call. If you are having any kind of technical issues, whether it's the registry, getting your wallet set up, anything that might block, as always, feel free to DM me on Slack and I'll help route you to the right point of contact and get that squared away for you. Or if you want, you're welcome to make your own issue in this repository right here. And this will be supported by some of our contractors that are working on some of the tooling, and you'll be able to see the progress versus just waiting for an update from me in Slack. I'll do the same thing. If I get a Slack update from you, I'll go ahead and fill this ticket out. But again, friendly reminder, if you're a notary, you encounter anything technical, as always, feel free to ping me and I'll help you one-on-one, or you could fill this bug report out yourself and it will file a ticket for that going forward. Check in on the inactive notaries. So thanks for the notaries that got reached out to and filed this petition application inside of GitHub. The purpose of this is not to remove notaries that wish to remain active or still have contributions to be made, but to kind of clear off notaries that have had zero engagement over the past period going forward. So 2 calls ago, we announced the list after some research and communications. On the last call, we said, hey, this is the list. This is the way to do it. And we gave you guys one more cycle. So the list that we have on the screen share right there on the left, those are all of the notaries that we have had zero communication with. No Slack comms, no emails, no GitHub answers, no attendance on the governance calls, and they've just had zero contact with the program for months now. So the qualification for the proposals on the right is those are the notaries that said, hey, I might have dropped off for X, Y, and Z reason. I'd still like to remain active. Here's my submission for transparency for the community. And so each one of these applications, RG went through and just left a comment. So if you're a notary and you were one of these, just check your issue. It might be as simple as like, hey, let's unblock the tech issue, or what's your plan for doing diligence going forward? Whatever it is, the goal is to unblock you so that you can participate going forward. If you have any issues, any questions, any problems, feel free to DM me on Slack and I'll help get you routed and we'll make sure that you're all squared away. To the notaries on the left, we're going to take those off of the GitHub application for notaries. And these are notaries that are being removed for no participation in the program. So I'll pause before we go on to working group and see if anybody has any questions or anything they want to discuss from that really quick intro on the inactive, the bug report, and some of the timelines. That is pretty straightforward. So the next part is working group from KZ. He's not on the call right now, so I'll do my best to kind of fill in and speak on behalf of what's going on with this working group. So with that, essentially what Enterprise Fill Plus is working on right now is two things. So as they're onboarding this really large data set from enterprises, what they're trying to implement is a KYC, KYB process. And so the names that you see listed on there are notaries that wish to remain in this working group and have completed that KYC step. KZ got feedback offline from other notaries that reached out and said, hey, we like this, but what kind of information is collected in this KYC, KYB check? Is it made public, and will people be able to see all of my information? The answer to that question is no. So the toggle service that used is private. It's not made available. It's not published outsourced. And the goal of that toggle is to link a real life human to the organization that will be signing on those applications. So they're still looking for members to participate in this working group. They've had to remove some inactive notaries themselves. These are notaries that didn't come to meetings, didn't review data sets, weren't really participating on it. So if you are keen, if you are a notary and you want to get involved in that Enterprise Fill Plus, today is August 22nd here in the States. The deadline is going to be Friday the 25th. So you have 3 days, and just reach out. There's an issue 948. You'll see it in this doc linked. Just go ahead and follow the steps in that issue, and you can get dialed into the Enterprise Fill Plus working group. They are also working on issues that go up, but I'm going to pause with that because I see a hand. Young, I see your hand. Floor is yours.
Hi, I got a question. A few days ago, I just sent a message to Kevin Z and expressed my interest being a eFill Plus notary, and he replied he promised he will send a message for KYC, but I didn't receive any KYC link. So what should I do?
That is such a great question. I'm not sure, but what I can do is this. I can run down an answer for you. So KZ's probably fast asleep with his time zone that he's in. I'll send him a note on Slack as soon as we get off this call, and I'll see if we can get you an answer by the time he wakes up in the morning. Would that work for you?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'll follow up. So the second thing that KZ is working on with the Enterprise Fill Plus is issue 966. And this ties back to kind of the heart of a lot of discussions that are taking place is what is quality deal making? So this conversation started out with the proposal 922. And really what they're looking for is what does poor distribution look like for a storage provider? And do we have any samples to kind of tie that back? So he kind of called out 3 examples that you'll see. It's like unknown distribution or no way to confirm the IDs that are going forward. Distribution that's just in one country when it might have been claimed to be across the whole world, and the minor IDs not matching. So what they're doing is if you have any input on this one, or if you have any proposal comments that you'd like to leave, they're asking for like measurable tools that can be used to look at these. And so this could be like CID sharing requirements, minor ID verifications. What exactly are tooling needs that can solve this as we start to look at investments in the tooling to make this easier for you going forward? So again, if you have thoughts on tooling needs, or if you have thoughts on like organizations that you'd like to submit for review for tooling, that's what KZ is looking for in this application. So you can see this in 922. It's linked in the deck, and that's going to be the best place for you to go look at it as you go. We have RG on the call. RG, can I pass the floor over to you for the update on trust and transparency?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Craig. So I wanted to touch on this issue, which is issue 963, which was proposing some guidelines for removal of notaries, given the number of issues that were created before this. And so the issue has not passed, but I wanted to share some of the learnings from this proposal based on the discussion. So you can go in detail on the Notary Governance repo and look at the issue. But some of the things that the main three things that were proposed are on the left, and some of the learnings are listed on the right side. So I think just summarizing it, there were requests to update the dispute tracker in its current form. A lot of people are using the dispute tracker to obstruct LDNs, or a lot of people feel so. And so I think the discussion was that before we create new qualifiers, we should look at the current dispute tracker. There was also some pushback for the lack of notifications in the current system. And so notaries and community members flagged that if you were to impose these qualifiers, then the lack of a notification system will impact the ability for notaries to comply. And the final one was that understanding like notary reputation remains a key challenge. And so I think before we are able to create new compliance new compliance requirements, we need to think about automation, because the open question still remains that who will be the one to looking after the non-compliance as such. And so I think those are all good points for me to think about the next iteration for this. And I'll be starting a discussion and proposing some of the next steps on this issue. And this is just a logistical update. So last week, I announced in the Filecoin Trust channel, the Trust Working Group channel, that Caro here, who's an active community member, she'll be supporting us with dispute resolution processes and building frameworks. But unfortunately, they were rescinded due to medical reasons. And so I'm currently working on a plan to find a replacement, as well as plan to implement in the absence of a person to help us with the framework development. So I hope to share that by Thursday this week.
Thanks, RG. I'll open it up if anybody has any thoughts on either Caro's here's work, saying goodbye and thank you, or the qualifiers for notary removal. All right. We'll have plenty of time at the end of the call if anything comes to mind. Moving on, there are two issues for topics of discussion, and these led to some really good conversations in the morning. So maybe I kick off, I'll hand it over to RG, and we have some of the same folks that were here in the morning. If you wanted to follow up with additional thoughts, love to hear it. So essentially what this application proposal is doing is it's saying, how can we look at the incentive structure for notaries going forward? For those of you that have been here for a while, you know that notaries started out in the tens, teens, they went up to the 20s, the 50s, and now hovering around the 80s mark. So as we have these notaries that are contributing their time, they're making sure that the data is onboarding, how do we compensate them for that? And where does that compensation come from? So what this proposal is looking to do is just start that conversation and then seeing what we can do to collect signal from you as notaries and what we could do to make this program work. So with that, I'll pass it over to RG, who's kind of been working with this really closely, for your thoughts on what comes next and what lessons have been learned.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So this is still very much in the discussion stage. I think I've presented some of my own ideas in this discussion. I think some of the things that have been discussed in this specific discussion topic, as well as some of the things that have been brought up in 774. The two overarching themes that we're seeing is working towards trustlessness, having less human notaries and more automated notaries like Glyph today. And so for me, the ideal next step would be to like propose that pathway in the upcoming election process. So what that might look like is we keep the current system in its form, but significantly reduce it. And it just becomes one of the many ways in which someone can get data cap. So tomorrow, if anyone on this call today were to design a tool, a front-end tool like Glyph, and you can apply to be a notary as an individual organization, and that tool of yours can then allocate data cap. So again, that's kind of like an idea that I'm sharing. But if you have other specific ideas in terms of how do we incentivize notaries, please share them in this discussion, and as well as some of the ways in which you think that we can compensate notaries. So there's some specific notaries who've proposed some numbers in terms of what the compensation might look like. So that is also very much welcome, because we haven't done like a survey or anything so far to understand what is like a good threshold that would be ideal for to compensate the amount of time that a notary spends. But yeah, I highly encourage you to check out this discussion.
I'll open it up. I know that we have the GitHub discussion, as RG mentioned. Does anybody have any thoughts or any input or anything they want to kick off? All right. We're talkative on the first, not so much on the second. That's okay. All right, Danny, I see your hand. Floor is yours.
I would see it as a challenge. So I noticed in the screenshot, Ajit, and I know that there was some spicy discussion about this, about the idea that SPs and clients should not be notaries. Do you want to just sort of talk about that a bit? Is this because you like who are you looking for in a notary? I guess that's a more positive version of that question. And I just want to underline, you said that this is your personal opinion, so I was just reiterate that.
So I think separating, proving that someone is not an SP or like a DP or a client, and they're applying on a notary is super difficult, right? So ideally, which is why I think the idea of applying for having more Glyph-like notaries makes much more sense. So tomorrow, that idea has kind of come up, as from this discussion. So as this discussion has progressed. So in that case, I think it would make sense. So if there's an SP that develops a front-end tool like Glyph and is very clear about what their standard for due diligence is. So an example would be that they would say, hey, our tool would support clients who need more than one PIP, right? And then they need to meet a threshold of a certain retrievability, certain deal distribution. And I think we can learn from what we've learned so far. But yeah, I think that was kind of the thinking behind this. I think my opinion has sort of changed since I started this discussion, because I've been kind of, the more I've been talking to people, I'm learning that making the separation is super difficult. The initial motivation when I proposed this was that I think there's an inherent conflict, right? And I think this has been brought up multiple times. When an SP can become a notary, there is a strong incentive to abuse. And so I think we should design for systems where the majority are not existing SPs or data preparers. So far, from what I've learned, even before the time I was here, I think that was the key case because this ecosystem and the program was so small. But I believe that now we might, might have reached. Again, we'll learn that if that's true or not when we propose this, to reach a stage where we might get external audiences, especially if you associate a strong monetary incentive associated. I think there will be people who will be willing to learn what the program is and not be involved as another stakeholder in the community.
I see CB has something up, but I just wanted to, I'll shut up. But like one thing that you throw out a couple of times, and I've been thinking about is that maybe we should set up another program similar to eFil, but for essentially intermediaries. And you mentioned Glyph. Web3 storage, big data exchange was another good example of this estuary, where like there's an established there's like large data en masse, but there are many, many clients, and there's sort of a process and for that. So in that kind of case, I think it's less than being notaries, more like we establish a process to give a grant of data cap to an intermediary like that, right?
Exactly. So yeah, the idea would be having multiple multisigs. So I think the idea of when you say a different program, to me that's just a different multisig. Today we have two. We have eFil Plus and the main one. And my own belief is that I think a lot of challenges arise because everyone is dependent on either or. I think tomorrow at least my ideal situation would be if we can create, let's say, between 12 to 15 multisigs in the upcoming round of election, and one of those multisigs will be kind of, the design would be in the current state. And for the rest of it, let's say big data exchange is one. So they apply for a certain amount of data cap. And then we, based on the systems and tools that we're designing, we can track how did they use the data cap. So right from data cap usage to them proving that the clients they work with and how did they utilize to get the next tranche. Sorry, not the next tranche, to get like a refill of data cap that was given to them. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there. Carrie and I are working on a proposal that we hope to kind of release in the next 2 weeks once we it's a more detailed proposal in this line of thinking. But yeah, I would also love to hear if there are people who might think that having multiple multisigs might not be a good idea. Yeah.
Thanks for that question and answer, Danny or G. CB Tan, I see your hand. The floor is yours.
Hi. Thanks everyone for the opportunity. Regarding data cap, right? I mean, is there a way to find out whether data cap clients are agnostic to the selection of SPs? Because I see a lot of data cap applications and they're all distributed to like 10, 20 different minor IDs, right? So suggest to me that there is a group of clients who might be agnostic to the SP profile, and then there's another group who are willing to who might be more stringent and therefore might be more willing to pay. Then for the first group, they are agnostic. When they get the data cap, can't we just do something like just taking a page out of a big data exchange, right? Why can't it just go into like an automatic system where it goes to an auction house or any kind of mechanism such that the distribution of the data cap is sort of randomized or competed on? Right, let's say if I get data cap, my flow of data cap, if I'm agnostic and therefore a less stringent application requirement, that data cap flows to somewhere. And then if it's an auction place where SPs bid and fight for it, it's kind of randomized or there's process for it. And then whatever that's being auctioned on can go into the pool to compensate for notaries' work.
Yeah. I just want to make sure, because I know you're very involved. Is this similar to Spade and ground control? Or would you say like what you're proposing is different? Because we are working on things like Spade and ground control.
What I'm proposing on is different. And anyone who gets a data cap, there can be a place where if you get data cap, it gets shown all the requirements are there. And then anyone within the Filecoin ecosystem can bid on it based on the requirements.
Yeah, RG, this is kind of an idea that we've talked about, like an auction house, but CB10, this is something we've been talking about, and if you want to kind of continue this discussion, we're more than happy to do it offline as well.
Okay. I just think like eventually if the data cap is sort of like competed against, if one another compete against it, or is randomized, there is less room for abuse.
Mhm.
But yeah, we can discuss this offline.
CB10, thank you. That's a good point, and I'm happy that Simon's going to follow up with you. If you need anything else or want to share, love to see any updates that you have. For everybody on the call, we had a lot of conversation about this on the morning. When I linked the video, I highly recommend you check it out. Lots of great points. I'm going to do my best to summarize, but if anybody who's on the call now is here in the morning and wants to jump on, I'd love the input. One of the questions that came out that really resonated with me afterwards was the data cap removal. And really one of the flags was, look, we've known as a community or governance that this is something that we'd like to get ahead of for quite a while now. So why aren't we prioritizing this? And if there's no hard reasons, let's prioritize this. So there's action right now to have a community-led proposal that talks about the steps for removing data cap after it's been distributed. And some of that conversation on the morning, the big highlights were, well, where do you start? Well, one easy way is to go back to closed, really old applications that never allocated that data cap. And then the second question was, do you just turn off the data cap or do you have some kind of a warning? So if somebody thought that they had data cap from months and months and months ago, does it seem right just to revoke it? Then the third point was, should there be a timeline on that data cap? So after you've earned and awarded that, should you keep it forever or should you keep it for a finite period of time? So that proposal that will be filed is a lot of great conversations that are going to come from that morning call, really around that fact of like, how does that tooling work? So I'm going to pause, and if anybody has any thoughts or anything else they want to add, love to get that. Love to get your input. Love to get it online then. If anything comes to mind, just let us know as we go through it. The other issue that's open that I highly recommend everyone checks out if you haven't done so already is a really well-written proposal from the community just talking about what is Filecoin Plus, how does it play into the ecosystem of Filecoin, and what makes sense? What have we outgrown? What does the future look like? And what should we be talking about as a community? And really that conversation revolves around the quality multiplier and how that incentive really works or might not work for the Fil Plus ecosystem. So if you haven't had a chance to look at 774, it's a read. It's a big read. And the reason why it's a big read is a lot of people have a lot of thoughts and they've taken the time to really put those thoughts down on that. So if you haven't checked out 774, you kind of owe it to yourself if you haven't done so and really jump in. It's really nice too, from the standpoint of getting that conversation out of Slack, where it's really hard to answer questions and have a back and forth, and into GitHub where everything can be threaded and everything can be answered and it can be jumped back and forth without a linear timeline. So thank you again for those of you that kick this off and really have like a really established conversation that's taking place in a place where we can all answer effectively and clearly. But with that, I'll pause and see if anybody on the call has any thoughts, read anything on 774 that they want to flag, or any questions. All right, well then we'll just expand it one final level. If there's anything on your mind from this call in the community or literally anything, the floor is yours. Right. Well, we're going to call it at halfway, but if there's anything that comes up, by all means, looking forward to answering it. Just show a hand and we'll stop. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming to the second call on August 22nd. I'll post the link to this in Slack as well as on the GitHub issue. It'll be on YouTube if you want to check out the earlier call. Thank you again. We'll see you guys on September 5th. Cheers, everyone.